The NHS has published trans guidance for schools saying that they should not let children who question their gender socially transition without parental consent. So that's the key thing. This sounds like a step in the right direction, doesn't it? Because for a period of time, it was looking very much like schools were going to say, if you just turn up one day and tell me that you want to be a girl or a boy now, we won't have to tell your parents, you can just socially transition in the school. Well, the National Health Service have said that parents should not be left in the dark about their child's gender identity and suggest that working with young people and their parents or carers is good practice. Social transitioning could include calling a child by a new name, using different pronouns, or allowing them to use different toilets. What I'm asking is whether or not this goes far enough. So even with parental consent, should schools be doing this? What if the teacher doesn't want to do it for ideological, religious reasons, etc.? Or actually, what if the parents are a bit loopy? Well, I can now get the views of human rights campaigner and activist Peter Tatchell. Peter, thank you very much for joining me, I believe, anytime soon. Yeah, there we go. Good stuff. Peter, yeah, OK, so should kids be allowed to socially transition even if their parents want them to? What if there's something wrong with the parents?
Well, first let me say that we're in this mess because the government promised in March that it would produce guidelines by the end of the summer. It hasn't done so. It has let down trans pupils, their parents, teachers and the wider public. So the government is to blame for this mess, and the NHS has helpfully stepped in. But they've not said that social transitioning should be banned. They've wisely said it's not recommended. They say that it is best if social transitioning is done with the approval of parents, teachers and the pupil. So a three-way alliance working together. And I agree with that. But there may be certain circumstances where it's not right, or it might even be dangerous to inform parents. So if parents are very ill-informed or perhaps even prejudiced against trans people, that might put that young person in danger.
OK, what happens? What happens, Peter? What I would argue is much more likely to happen, actually, is that a teacher decides that, because of their own conviction, that they don't think it's the right thing to do to call, you know, Steve Susan one day because Steve has decided that he's now Susan at school without telling the parents, and that teacher then gets sacked. I think that's more likely than this kind of, you know, romantic ideal that you're protecting a child from some kind of bigoted parental background.
Well, the fact is, already in many of our schools, pupils have socially transitioned. And in my talks on human rights in schools, I've met many of those pupils, their fellow pupils and their teachers, and none of them say there's been any problem. Now, of course, there might be a problem at some point. There may be, as you say, a teacher who doesn't want to use the correct pronoun or the correct name. That may be a problem in the future, but I haven't heard of any cases so far. Basically, the schools that
have you heard of a lot of young children who want to transition having coexisting mental health problems?
Some do, but in the schools that I've been to, where I've met these young people, I've interrogated the staff and other pupils quite intensively to ask them about what the circumstances are. And the universal position I've received is that those kids are accepted, they're happy, they're well adjusted. It's not a problem, it's not an issue. So, you know, I think we need to hope for the best. You know, we need to think that, you know, being kind to trans kids is the way to go, and we shouldn't demonize them or see them as a
difference, though, isn't there? There is a world of difference between, you know, demonizing somebody and saying and playing along and pandering to them and deny. You know, that child at some point during their schooling will attend a biology or a science class, right? And the school is allowing them to live their lives in complete disregard of scientific and biological fact. So I would imagine that's quite confusing to that child.
Well, no one's denying the biological facts. Biological sex is real. There's no debate about that. That's absolutely true. That is the science. But gender identity is something different. So if you accept someone's gender identity, you're not denying their sex. You're accepting their identity.
Should there be checks on the parents of trans kids? So how do we know that there aren't parents who have things like Munchausen by proxy, who decide that their lives aren't interesting enough, and so they want to make their children more interesting, and so they're going to basically say to the kid that you should be trans, and that kid, at a young, impressionable age, goes into school and does that? I mean, should there not be checks on the parents? Not because they're bigoted, but because they might be nutty.
Well, I've never heard of such an example, such a case. Again, there may be one or two instances, but the idea of putting all parents under interrogation on the basis of what a very tiny minority might do or say, I don't think.
Well, isn't that strange? Because we're being asked to change laws on the basis of what a tiny minority want.
Well, in our society, we are a democracy and we respect individual rights and personal freedom, and that must include trans young people as well. We accept racial diversity, we accept LGBT plus people, we accept disabled kids in schools. Accepting diversity is not a bad thing, but of course, we always need to be mindful of safeguarding issues, both when it comes to trans kids and to parents. And we do, as I said, wherever possible, and in 99% of cases, we do actually work with parents, or schools work with parents, and the parents support their trans kids. Okay. And there's no evidence that either the parents or the trans kids have any problem or issue.
I just wonder if we look for it there. Peter, look, thank you very much. OK, Peter, I do appreciate your time. Now, I hope you have a good Friday evening and a nice weekend. Peter Tatchell there.